There once was a place enchanting your darkest desires. There once was a road that crossed all your tranquility. A fight for true love, a fall for timeless lust, secrets of the labyrinth, destroyed bonds at the glance in a mirror. Hearts closed, thorns in prison, a spirit hardened. Rise up, warrior, confess your truth. Join us inside Black Garden.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Welcome to the Career Dominion podcast with your host, Dominion, and welcome to episode 7 of our wonderful season 2 of the Black Guarding Dating, Relationship, and Marriage series. I'm so excited to bring you another powerful, wonderful guest. Again, it's going to be a wonderful season 2 here, and I have a wonderful guest, Miss Mara Palermo out of the Charlotte, North Carolina. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Again, thank you for being on Decree of Dominion. And so with that being said, can you tell the audience a little bit about who you are?
Yeah, like you said, my name is Mara, and I am in Charlotte, North Carolina. I'm a dating and relationship coach. I started this journey, feels like forever, but in my previous life, I was a salon owner and worked with women a lot. And so I heard all about relationships all the time. And so this dating and relationship coaching it just emerged from my experiences being behind the chair and realizing what a need it was for women and men as well, because I work with both now. But before it was just mainly women to really establish a great relationship with yourself. And so this has been my work for the past, I would say, 3 to 5 years now. So really excited about it.
Awesome, awesome. And again, very, very excited to dive deep into your experience in this
Mhm.
wonderful episode. And so as I start with every Black Garden episode, um, I hope one thing that is said here today, everyone can take to resonate with you. Like I said, we have a very various backgrounds tuning in here today for this episode. And so as I always encourage the audience, is just take one thing to resonate with you that you can apply daily to your life to decree the dominion of your mind and reveal the true light that shines. And as always, as we dive inside the Black Garden, make sure you have your first aid kits. Make sure you have your Band-Aids and your peroxide because the thorns inside the garden could prick you a little bit. And so with that being said, welcome inside the Black Garden. And so the first question I have for you, Mara, is what inspired you the most to become a relationship and dating coach?
I think at first it was my own experiences in dating and relationships many years ago. Like I said, I owned a salon and was in that industry for a very long time, and 90% of the conversation was all about relationships. And I started noticing a lot of patterns over and over again when I would hear different stories, whether they were going into relationships, they're breaking up, they're getting married, getting divorced. And this was what I would say in my early 20s. I was in a relationship that was not healthy and learned a lot from it. And it was wild to think that because of that relationship, I would be here today helping other people with their relationships. But it taught me a lot of things because at that time, I didn't realize what my patterns were. And even though it was a really bad relationship, when I was finished, I thought, well, I just need to find someone new. That's all. Like, it's just that's what it was. And then I started noticing patterns that kept showing up, and I felt like relationships were like a roller coaster. I was just they were up and down. I never really actually felt fully secure in them, and was realizing the same thing with the clients. And so when I started to do inner work, I think that was the main shift for me because as I was always helping people transform, their external looks, once I realized that the true transformation was inside, then I was fascinated by the way people related to each other, human behavior. And so spent years, studying that, understanding patterns. And it wasn't, everything really started to click for me when I learned what attachment theory was. And so once I was able to understand that, it was almost like the missing piece because I was able to actually put a name to what actually was happening. And so that was why I felt even more inspired to, one, heal these parts of me and my attachment wounds, and also helping other people do the same.
Awesome, awesome. I love everything that you said there. And what I want the audience to take away from just a quick synopsis of the reason why you got started is that you started to self-identify. You didn't, make excuses for yourself or just say the cliche, all men are the same, and, I'll never have a successful relationship because, all men cheat or all men have roller coaster mentality and all men, our players or just all the things, we've grown accustomed to on social media and just the different fads throughout our lives. And again, I want to encourage the audience out there, if you're listening and regardless of your relationship status, especially if you're single and you are looking for that soulmate or that, wonderful relationship that you desire, you just have to, again, can look inside. I always say everything ends and begins in you. And so the common denominator is always yourself. And so you
Yeah.
really have to look inside and see what inside yourself is attracting these men or women that you um, really just are just not fit with and not desired to be with in a successful relationship. And so I love that you really, and also to the audience, make sure you have conviction in your thought process as well. Don't just, identify, but also take action and really begin to debunk and really dive deep into yourself and to figure out what changes you need to make and go ahead and make those changes. And then um, just know that to show yourself grace. And again, it's going to be hard. It's not going to be
Hmm.
a overnight thing. You're not going to wake up tomorrow and, find Prince Charming, right? Or the wonderful angel woman, Minerva, right? So again, just know you're going to allow yourself some time and show yourself some grace as you continue along this journey. And just know that again, even if someone's been a relationship coach for 100 years, right? Nobody's perfect. It's a journey for everybody. And so just, keep that in mind as you're tuning in as well. And so with that being said, I'm curious, what are some of the biggest red flags that you saw in your early 20s relationship? And looking back, how has that shaped your thought process as you work with clients?
Yeah, sometimes it's the you know what it is? It's funny, is the butterflies. I think people want that quick, instant. They think it's a chemistry or connection, and they're like, oh, well, he doesn't give me butterflies, or this guy does. And usually, when it's those butterflies that you're feeling, sometimes it's your anxiety. Really, it's in your internal, unconscious mind basically telling you this isn't safe. This is actually is activating things inside of you. And we find that we do. It's like, oh my God, we're like chasing these butterflies. But in reality, it's really not you. It's usually not the best. It doesn't work out the best. Let's just put it that way. And I find that when we're because if we're really trying to develop a true connection, it takes a little bit of time, right, to do that, to develop. And some people think that it's boring. So oftentimes that's what I would hear is like, oh, well, he's boring or she's boring. And to me, it's like a red flag more so for them because they're obviously still wanting some kind of dopamine hit, right? And they need to have those butterflies. So sometimes it could show up in like love bombing. So oftentimes I know that before years ago, it could have been, "Oh my god, he really likes me. He won't stop calling me, and he's doing all the things." But then all of a sudden, it can turn very it can go one of both ways. One, it can completely fizzle out, or it's turns into some narcissistic, dynamic, right? So there's that. The other thing I believe is that's a red flag sometimes is this, when people want to play hard to get, right? It's because again, it's these patterns that we're playing with people because we don't really know what we want or we don't really know how we feel and how to articulate that. And oftentimes I hear people saying like, "We'll just match his energy," and it's like, no, we're not matching energy here, right? It's like if this isn't in alignment, then we go in a different direction. But when we start to do certain things like that, we end up hurting ourselves because then it becomes again, it becomes a game and it also starts to become this um cat and mouse, like chasing, which really again leads to destruction sometimes too.
I love everything you said there because you basically just described my dating life from ages 18 to like 23. Because first I'll start with what the first thing you said. I just remembered, as you were speaking, I just kind of had flashbacks of, just coming from a man's perspective, just from my background, as you guys know, for on the creative me and just having that domestic violence survivor background. Always coming from a place of a good heart. I was always the nice guy, still am obviously, but always the good heart, the nice guy, and always looking back, especially being more mature now at almost 30, really just understanding back then, always operating from a deficiency mentally and emotionally. And I really want to break that down really from both perspectives here. Because from a man's perspective, I just remember I'd always pay for the first date because, I was just like, oh, that's what gentlemen do. I'm a gentleman, I'm the good guy. So I pay for the first date. And um, I just remember that anxious feeling like when you were talking about butterflies, I just used to remember like, you know, am I going to get a second date? Take her to a nice restaurant and, you know, and I just remember I'd never been like a really angry person or anything narcissistic like that. But I just remember just getting actually a couple of my coworkers there, older ladies at my job. And we were actually just talking about that, like, being so stressed, sometimes you don't eat, because they're either getting on your nerves or, why won't she text me? I just remember back then, like, why won't she text me back? Or, it's been, I get off work, I haven't got a text back from her yet. Or, um, you know, it used to always just be a deficiency, pursuit, like you said, that chase the tail cat and mouse game where it's like, when are we going to have our first kiss? When are we going to hug, on the first, and it'd always be like the first date, like, I wonder if she'll let me hold her hand or, you know, um, just, always looking for that outside validation. I think that's what you're alluding to, especially in the youth. And, from the man's perspective, really trying to determine, again, getting that anxiety of, does this woman, and for women, does this man really like me? And really allowing that to determine every aspect of your life, especially as a young person. If they don't text you back, that your whole days are ruined, especially at work, or, you don't even want to eat. Back
Uh-huh.
then we didn't really have bills like that, or if we did, it was very minimal. So we could go out and party and go to, you know, different restaurants or go out, and it's like I don't even want to go eat. I don't even want to do anything. I just want him or her to text me back and just talk to me. And again, like you said, the love bombing of you know if that energy matching example you gave, like if this girl like always like if she's not texting me, and it wasn't nothing crazy like every 5 minutes, but if she's not periodically throughout the day texting me, um then she's just not interested. And it was
Hmm.
also the context of the text. I think especially in the youth, we misread a lot of things. Like if I say good, I was always the big like good morning paragraph guy, right? And if I just get I used to hate acronyms back then. I used the GM with a little smiley face. I'd be like, "And she's not interested. What you mean GM?" Or uh, "What's up?" Or um, HRU for how are you? Just little. You know, I just keep laughing. As you were telling that story because
Yep.
it just reminded me of back then of just those little things. I used to get so like, mad at myself, like, oh, she's not going to be my girlfriend one day. She's not interested. And in reality, as you grow into adulthood, you just realize it's honestly not that deep. People have lives. We work, we try to survive and reach dreams and goals. And it's just like, you know, don't read into. And so if you're listening here and you're
Hmm.
from ages 18 to like 20, I'm 28 right now. So I would say ages 18 to 25, um, really understand like it's really not that deep. And honestly, really all ages, because I even see older gentlemen that kind of still have that mindset,
Hmm.
always, blowing up phones, calling the phones. And,
Yeah.
we'll dive deep into that as well on some of those other red flags. And then the other thing you said is that it's hard to get cat and mouse. Um, I remember that too. Just, there always be that one woman that, especially in high school, where it's like, oh, I really want to take her on a date. And she's like, nope, no date. I'm playing hard to get. Or, you know, back then you'd give the number, but they wouldn't text back to 3 days later. And then it's a little acronym like, hi. It's like, I
Right.
gave you my number 3 days, or we exchanged numbers 3 days ago. What do you mean, hi? I've been trying to, get to know you and take you out. And so I just love that you broke that down because, again, it just reminded me of, back in the early youth. And so, with that being said, what are some ways that, individuals can, kind of get out of that mindset?
Well, I think the main thing was, like I said, when you understand what your attachment style is, a lot of it does make sense because what happens is when you uncover some of these things, you start to see your own patterns, right? Because we just are just doing us. We don't sometimes take the time to look at these things. And one of the things that I remembered long time ago when I was doing this, when I kind of started doing this work, this internal work, and one of the sometimes you don't know how you show up, right? Or sometimes like self awareness is challenging because if you're always wanting to say, look outward, like you were saying, validation, blaming other people, it's everybody else, etc. How do we actually change these things? We have to be aware of it first, right? And so sometimes it's a challenge to see things yourself, um, especially if you grew up in a environment that wasn't healthy, uh, and didn't have modeling of healthy relationships. How do you know really how to change things? Because it was very much um, normal to you, right? So there's what I remember the one time there was, this is a good way to do something for yourself is you ask five of your friends, five close people that you can trust, that ask them, what are my strengths? Um, what would be, weaknesses or things I could strengthen? And, what is something what is the pattern that you see me repeating over and over again that maybe I don't see, right? So you ask these people these questions, and it was interesting because that was like one of the things was like mine was dating other people or friendships or things like that that maybe just weren't always in a line that I felt like I was always like the leader or helping someone or feeling I have to be someone's savior, right? And I was just like then once I saw that, I was like, it's across the board. Okay, a lot of people were saying when it came to like who I was dating. So for me, it was helpful um because I was able to see it from like an outside perspective, right? And so once you see something like that, once it's brought to your awareness, now those are things that you can change. And sometimes if we don't know where to start, that's a good place is to ask some people around you.
Here you go again. Look, I love as you said that because it reminded me when you said, trying to be head honcho. It reminded me of that old Alicia Keys songs, that Superwoman song. But for me, from a man's perspective, um, just always, like I said, the dating range from 18, 22,
Hmm.
25, always trying to put that cape on. Every woman, was always trying to be the savior, like you said. And, you know, all their heartbroken or their, damaged goods or all I was always the, you know, probably from ages 18 to 20, I was the, give money guy. I was the
Hmm.
nice, like oh, you're late on your car payment. I'll give you $170. Or, oh, you need $30 for now it's Cash App. I call it the Cash App crew. And for those of you that are followers of the creative, you know how I feel about the Cash App crew. So we'll leave that alone, I promise. But, back then I was, um, just PayPal or Venmo and, or just cash. And, or, hey, can you buy me something to eat? That was always another one. I was always a big, and especially being a private chef. The way it used to get me just with that Superman, again, I have my cooking business. So they would just always say, oh, you could cook for me sometime. And, um, that got me in trouble a lot. Just always trying to, you know, be that superhero. And to your point, not really dating people that could actually benefit me
Yeah.
mutually. And so I kind of want to speak on that.
Hmm.
What are some key tips and characteristics that you feel are necessary for a mutual healthy relationship?
I definitely feel like the way they treat themselves is a huge indication of how they're going to treat you, right? So, if they take care of themselves in because it's not just I know a lot of times people when they think of like a woman if she wants a man, she thinks of someone who can protect and provide and be a leader and all of these things, right? And so um that comes with internal work. Wouldn't you agree? So it's kind of like you have to be able to lead yourself, right? And it's the same way when you're in a relationship. So if people are talking about what they want in a partner, oftentimes you're like, I want someone who is honest. I want someone who's transparent. I want someone who is have emotional intelligence and are grounded or respectful. They don't lie. These types of these qualities and characteristics are all great. And one of the questions I always ask too is where do you line up with these, right? Because if we're trying to align with someone who are bringing these things to the table, then we also want to have those certain qualities as well too, because we'll be able to actually recognize those in people. If we don't, and we have some wounding and things that we need to heal, we'll also see that in other people as well. So it's also taking the audit of where are you too. Do you feel that you are trustworthy? Are you when you say something, do you mean it? Are you going to back it up with action? And I feel like those are really important things. The one thing that I feel like too is really big, I know for me, because I look at it as like spiritual, mental, emotional, physical, like there's different things to look at, right? Because we want to make sure that they're mentally not, and now look at everybody has issues, right? But I'm saying though, like, how are they taking care of, their mental health, their emotional health? Are they able to sit with emotions? Are they able to be a safe space for your emotions? Can we work through conflict together? I think that is such
Right.
um, a huge quality to have in a relationship dynamic, because when it's good, right? But when things aren't or conflicts come up, how do we rally? How do we come together and work through things so we can strengthen the relationship? Or are we at odds all the time and we're actually, creating that gap between us? So I think those are really good qualities.
Awesome. I love the way you broke those down again because it all just goes back to, it all ends and begins in you. And, if you're not first, like we've been saying all episode, you got to be willing to do that inner shadow work, that inner work and really look in the mirror and look back. And again, if you don't look at yourself, you'll never find what you're looking for in a relationship because you'll just be trying to, it's like when you're a kid throwing Play-Doh in preschool, right? You're just, throwing paint on the wall and mud and just, look, I made this and you don't even know what it is. It's just kind of like abstract art. And in a relationship, you just want it to be like a fine chiseled, you know, it's like building a building, right? It's like an architect, and you're the architect of yourself and of your own life, your own legacy. And you really have to. One thing I've learned, just as I've grown older, is just how serious dating actually is. Back then, like to the superhero complex, it was like
Uh-huh.
I'll just date any woman, whatever, and I can fix her, right? I was like the mechanic. I just thought I was the emotional mechanic where it didn't matter how damaged she is. It doesn't matter if she's been abused, if she's been, taken advantage of, if she's, had a terrible family, if she was, you know, on drugs or whatever. It's just like, yep, I can fix it. And we really have to be careful. And I love that you broke down the different aspects, mental, physical, spiritual, emotional, and really, especially from the spiritual side, there's a lot of different things from spiritual and
Mhm.
mental side that, we're not aware of as we're younger. And again, you just have to really be careful. We all see the stories on the news. There's countless stuff on social media. This guy went crazy and did this, or this girl went crazy. Why would she do this? Or, why did they do that to the kids? And, we see all these stories with how relationships end, terribly and kind of like that catastrophic, event. And we're thinking like these people are insane. But one thing I've realized just from my own personal, domestic violence survival story is that, it all starts with normal people. They're just, regular people that um, something, triggers, something sets them over the edge, something's unworked inside them. And that's what I love that you've been saying the whole episode. Again, if you don't identify and acknowledge, that something's wrong and that something is amiss and you're not on the right path, then it just kind of, you know, just festers, right? How many times do you, think you're eating healthy, you eat fast food every day, you're drinking alcohol, and you go to the doctor and like, hey, you got high blood pressure, or hey, you got diabetes, or hey, you got, um, your kidneys are kind of, you've drunk so much alcohol throughout the years, your kidneys are failing. And you're just like, what? I only drink, every day. Or, I only eat McDonald's, 8 times a week with 7 days. And so there's just a lot of different things that, we always look at the aftermath or the uh, focal point, but we don't look at the daily habits and that those patterns, like you were speaking of, that led to that throughout the day, you know, and it could just be anything, it could be, school shootings or just mental health crisis. And it's not the event. That's just the explosion of the volcano, like an old had an old counselor when I was in middle school tell me about that. That's just the volcano erupting, and everybody gets all the views. You get all the views and you get all the comments when the
Mm-hmm.
volcano erupts, right? If you go to Yellowstone and you see a volcano and it's just chilling, you just take pictures and you walk past, but if that lava starts flowing, then you're gonna see, the panic and the anxiety. And so the
Right.
same thing in life, in relationships, we really have to understand that all these people, all these crazy, horrific stories started from, regular people that were born just like us.
Mm-hmm.
They grew up just like us. And along the way, different things happened that created a certain patterns that weren't corrected and weren't acknowledged that led them to that path and that final eruption, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
And so you really just have to, again, really acknowledge and work on those inner um, work and really, when you're looking at those different patterns and looking at those different qualities, really be convicted. One thing that I struggled with early on, in my youth was conviction,
Yeah.
and really be a man slash woman of your word. If me personally, I'll just say it. I hate cigarettes. Always have, always will. Never smoked one, never will. And so my big thing is like, I won't date a woman that is a habitual smoker, right? And, I found myself, in my early, teen, early 20s, you know, I'd be on a date, and I remember going on a date on Valentine's Day one year with an old high school classmate, and she asked, she stepped out of the car to smoke, and I'm just like, why am I even on this date? I hate cigarettes. And it was just like really a eye-opening situation for me,
Mm-hmm.
because it's like, why are you, you know, conforming to something that you don't want? And a lot of times um, we consider things and we, contemplate things that should be non-negotiables and those red flags, but, you just compromise. And, you really just have to look in the mirror and say, why are we compromising for, no-nos, right? And so, um,
Yeah. Yep. And that's exactly what where you need to go, right? It's instead of, but well, here's what happens. Some people will be like, well, I don't like smoking, so you should quit. But it's like, in reality, it's, hey, I had this non-negotiable with myself. I don't like smoking. Why am I with this person that is smoking, right? And so this is where the power is. And that's where we do this, right? We go against some of the things, and it could be for whatever reason. It could be, sometimes we have these beliefs that are just like, well, like there's nobody else in the world, right? It's like, no, but who am I going to find? It'll take me forever, or they're afraid to be alone, right? So we go, we basically settle for things that we don't want. And in reality, all that's doing is just telling us unconsciously that we can't have what we want, or we're not worthy of it, or we're not good enough, right? And so when we start to take these chances, right, and be courageous and actually go inward and really take that time to get to know ourselves, and then we choose more from our authentic place than our wounded place, and so that's where the shift begins, because the more you are comfortable with yourself and you know yourself so well, it's easier to say no to the things that you're like, no, this just really isn't aligned with what I would desire. And know that there's plenty out there that are, you know, in alignment with what you have. It does change the way that you are out there in the world. It changes your relationship journey. Because we're not looking for just anybody, right? It's like, you're a bit more selective. So it might take a little bit longer, maybe, right? Because before, I know when I was like younger, I felt like there was like always guys around and stuff. But it's like, as you start to, grow a little bit older, and you notice, yeah, there might be always a selection, but they're not really what you want, right? So, um, but again, sometimes we're chasing the validation and the attraction and things like that, and we end up becoming attached to someone when deep down we want to be connected to someone. And so there's that distinction that's there because it's different. And once we're able to break from that, then we can start to choose differently. And it does take work for sure.
And again, I agree with everything you said, and it kind of, had me thinking, I feel like a lot of us, just in life, we struggle with that self-worth and
Yeah.
that understanding that, you can have what you want and, you don't have to settle. And a lot of times we just, say whatever, we'll deal with it. And we really don't understand that, you don't have to be with the cigarette smoker, right? You could just, and you don't have to try to change everybody. I think from both sides, men and women, we've all had that relationship where, you know, the guy or girl did everything opposite of what you want, what you like. You know, I hate cigarettes. She smokes every 5 seconds. It'd be women like, he never cleans up after himself. And I'm a, OCD neat freak. So why would you be with a man that, doesn't even take care of his hygiene or doesn't wash his clothes, doesn't wash his dishes? And then now you're angry at him, but you're really angry at yourself. And then now it rubs off on all your friends and family because it's like, well, now I'm in this relationship. And sometimes you even get married and have kids. It's like now you're in this marriage of unhappiness. And it's like, I'm always doing all the chores. I got to clean up. But this is who they showed you who they were, at the
Hmm.
beginning. You just choose not to acknowledge it. And so I really want to ask before we get into
Hmm.
the marriage stuff, like on acknowledgement, how does one, I know people are listening and tuning in, how does one really begin to find that self-worth to really have that confidence of, hey, I can really manifest what I deserve? Because I think it's a lot, just with, social media and books and movies and just different things like that. It kind of seems like a fantasy. Like, can you really have the man or woman that you want and desire? Or is it kind of like this unforeseen, like um, fairy tale, right? That is just unattainable. And so, in your experience, how have you helped individuals with that on their journey?
That's a great question. And I always say that. I'm like, dang it, Disney. Yeah, you ruined it for us all. And
More Rapunzel.
yeah. And so I think I do feel I feel like I've seen all of it, right? I've worked with people who are in really great marriages. I mean, they're human, right? So you're gonna maybe go through some things, and I've seen people who really have been with that person, right? And so, and then also they're not, and it always goes back to what one of the things that I do see in that is there is this level of safety. It's like this person just made me, they just felt so safe in the relationship that they really felt like they could just be themselves. And not that anything was perfect, but because they were able to be themselves, because they were able to, they looked, it's like they'll look out for each other. And the like level of respect was there. It was kind of like even if they got mad or even if there was something that was going on, they still were able to maintain that respect and also be able to like work through things. And so I think that it's almost like when you allow someone to just be themselves, right? Like think of like when you're with your friends. If you're around a group of friends and you're just like yourself and it feels great, right? It's like they've been your friends forever. It's similar in that way. I think safety is such a huge thing when it's in relationships. And again, it comes back to having that sense of safety within yourself and being able to just be free, if you will, meaning that you can be authentic, you can be true to yourself. If you you can express yourself. And I feel like when we're able to really be in that space, then we're able to, and have that person that appreciates that, and they're the same way as well. I think when we're activating ourselves in that way so that we can have that growth mentality, then yes, it creates that, it has that magnetism to it, but you also have that grounding, and you're secure within yourself, but you also have that security within the relationship. I feel like that's where, when we talk about this dream, I think what it is there's a little bit of of the, you get married, you find your person, and it's happily ever after, right? This is where I feel like it is a little bit of myth. Yes, you can have happily ever after, but it's like, it takes work. Do you know what I mean? Like, it actually really takes work, because there's two people that are consciously working on themselves, and they're coming together. And so the way I see it is, they're interdependent, not codependent, not hyper independent, but they are able to have a relationship with themselves, have a relationship with, with their partner. And that's where it's not, you're my every single thing, that everything revolves around you, and it's very codependent. They can't breathe and they can't grow. And it's, or one person's so hyper independent, or both, where they want to maintain a, um like the single lifestyle, but then be in a relationship, but not really give to the relationship, maybe emotionally, right? What or financially, or different ways. And so this is what I see, is just, it's like two people who can co-create and have that interdependency, instead of pulling at each other. They're elevating each other.
Yeah, yeah. And then when as you were speaking on the happily ever after, I just think people have that false sense of the journey's ended once you get married.
Yes.
And it's kind of like that, it's kind of like that closing of the book, right? Or, the ending credits of the favorite movie, you know, um, it just reminds me of Shrek back in the day. You jump in the little onion carriage, and, Donkey sings that song, and then it's the end, right? And you really just have to understand that it's a continuous, I always say it's like an infinite game of life, and it's a continuous journey. And um, just even in the vows, for better or
Mm-hmm.
worse, to death do us part. It's not till, I put the ring on do us part, right? Or till we have the last kiss after the pastor says you may kiss the bride and we're good, right? Or even at the reception, it's like, oh, as soon as she takes the dress off, we're good. It's like, no, you actually have to live life together now. And um, again, I love everything you broke down there, is because, I know we have this 50-50, culture, and the Cash App crew. I'm sorry, I said I wasn't going to say it. And just all that stuff. And so,
Yeah.
with that being said, as we're talking about marriage, what are some characteristics that you think have to be in place, just have to, like, non-negotiables, to even consider getting married and being happy?
I do feel like a vision is very important, right? Because if you're just like, yeah, I want to be married, however, you see yourself going off and living in the country one day, and she wants to be in the city, and you want kids, and then she doesn't. And do you know what I mean? Like, I think the alignment is so important. And I do feel like it's something that should be talked about, not like you have to day one, but I do feel like these are, in reality, it's like, what is it that you actually want? I think when we talk about characteristics of somebody, again, it's in the dating process. Are they offering, a date, saying they're going to call you? Are they consistent? Are they actually doing what they're saying they're going to do? And um, how are they emotionally? I think that's a huge thing, because I know, of course, like when we're first dating, it's like we're excited and there's all the things, and we can lose sight of certain um, red flags, if you will. And then usually over time, as we start to get together and we get comfortable with each other, then it's like, because of that, we are things are going to happen, right? Meaning, how does this person handle conflict? How do they handle pressure? How do they handle stress? How do they handle, like, these are really big things because it's going to happen. And so you can see when these things, because like in the honeymoon phase, it's fun. But when you start to see these things for who they really are, those are the things I feel like you have to pay attention to as well. And when something comes up, are they acknowledging the way that you feel? Do they care about your feelings as well? Right? Are they taking you in consideration and themselves? And also, are they being true to themselves? Because like you were talking about being the nice guy. Is it someone who is I want someone who is going to set a boundary with me, right? Like I don't want someone just to be nice to me all the time, right? Because I'm going to need some accountability myself. So it's kind of like being able to have that, but can we do it in a healthy way? Can we come back together after a disagreement? And those are really key things because you get to see how somebody is able to handle things. And, if they're not able to handle conflict well, do they shut down? Do they run away? Do they not call you? I mean, we get to see these things, and it's a huge indication because this is if and also, are they willing, if you bring something to their attention, are they willing to just understand where you're coming from and maybe make some changes? And we're not saying you have to be a different person, but are they willing to, if you're setting a boundary, are they actually honoring that? And so these are all things that I do feel like will come out quickly if you understand what they are. And also, if you're practicing, again, if you're practicing it yourself, no one's going to be perfect, but it's a good indication of how healthy the relationship could be.
Awesome. I love that you said that because, a lot of times, one, we don't know what we want. So again, like that vision, back to that. And a lot of people marry for status or for a false sense of
Hmm.
validation or security. Like, oh, you know, and one thing I'll say to the viewers I just thought of is be careful about your family and people around you, right? Oh, girl, you should marry him because he has money, or his
Yeah.
parents have money, or his family has money, or hey, girl, or hey, dude, she's, really pretty. You should just go for it because she's hot, right? And we always, there's always the bro code, yeah, dude, you got one, we always we heard the term back in the day, the trophy wife. And
Hmm.
it's just like, oh, well, yeah, she's, growing up, we used to always make that, funny joke, like, yeah, she's dumb as a box of rocks, or they're not the sharpest tool in the shed, but hey, she's hot. So
Right.
she'll do right. And
Hmm.
then what happens when those looks wear off? Then it's like, oh, I messed up, or oh, I didn't
Yeah.
really think about that. And then also, um, as well as, as you're doing that inner work, really understanding that, again, like I said, I was a nice guy back in the day, really understand that, hey, you can't just say yes all the time. I had to learn that, going through my 20s. And it's just like, all right, because eternally, I know what gets on my nerves and I know what bothers me. But again, it's okay. It's like, if you're going to be with this person, you're going to actually have to hold them accountable and, speak up. They always say closed mouths don't get fed. And also on, hearing your partner, we're born with two ears and one mouth for a reason,
Yeah.
right? And so you really have to not only understand that, you need to listen, but also you need to understand that, you know, the more it eats at you inside, the more that volcano is the bubble. And then, you know, Lord forbid, something crazy happened, and, now you committed an act of domestic violence, or, you took a rash judgment and, smacked somebody upside the head. And it's like, it's not that the person was an abuser. It's
Yeah.
that, you know, this thing that drove them crazy, they never addressed with their partner. They never sat their partner down and had actual communications. Like, hey, I hate cigarettes.
Right.
If you never tell the person that you hate cigarettes, they're going to keep smoking. And then when you get, in a relationship, you move in together, they're going to smoke in the house. And if you really hate the smell of cigarettes and you never tell them, they're just going to think that it's just a normal thing. And they're just going to be like, oh, babe just doesn't smoke, right? We all do things that the other person doesn't do. Or
Hmm.
same thing with drinking, oh, she just doesn't like to drink. So I'm going to get hammered every night. And, you know, inside the woman's just like, I really hate alcohol. And it's like, well, why are you with a man that only drinks alcohol? And then you beat yourself up and you get that low self esteem and, you erupt and something happens where you know, he gets drunk, you get in a fight or, something bad happens or something tragic happens. And it's like, you really should have never been in that situation and position in the first place. And so I just, want to commend, if you're on here listening and any of this, resonates with you, I always say seek higher counsel, find yourself a coach, a therapist, and somebody that you can talk to these things, really someone that can give you a second set of eyes or even a third set of eyes. And really, like you said at the beginning, ask those 5 people, your strengths, weaknesses, and, your patterns, because, they might be able to see something that you don't even, that's oblivious to you subconsciously. And so I always like asking, you know, just with the social media age now, do you believe in the 50-50 culture? And what is your opinion on, all that?
Yeah, so I can't say I can get behind it. And I think also is because it was never really my experience. Do you know what I'm saying? Like for me personally, I always was dating someone who wanted to treat, or take me to dinner or do certain things like that. And they definitely may have been, and even when I was, young, it wasn't like they all had like this money or anything like that. I think what it was the mentality. It was the mentality of, look, the man, he may not, the woman might make more, right? Or vice versa. And I know like it's so different now too. And I know a lot of people are in it with this 50-50. I it doesn't compute in my brain. It just doesn't. But I can understand it. Does that make sense? Like I can understand why. I just feel like with a man who I know of men as like they're strong, protective, like leaders. Like that's how I think of men in my mind, right? And regardless, I remembered one time the there was I was dating somebody and they were in transition from one career to the next. And so um he, that he didn't want to start applying because this one position he really wanted, but it wasn't going to open for like 6 months, right? And we were long distance and the whole thing. And I remembered we wanted to see each other. And so at that time I was younger and he was like, well, I was like, well, I can get a flight and come and see you. And it was just for him, it just didn't make any sense. It was like, no, like he went and borrowed money from his sister to get a flight for me to make sure that when I came down there, I still had a great time and he was just going to pay her back. Do you know what I mean? Like, so to me, it's not about they have to have all this money. It's just the mentality of, I want to be able, I don't want you to worry about that because I have that. Right. And so I think that's where, um, call me old school or whatever, I don't know, but that's just I believe in that type of a dynamic. However, I also know that women now, it's not saying that you can't, it's still like the man is still like leading in that way. It wasn't about the money, it was just the fact that he was going to figure something out for us. It was the fact that, he was he puts the plans in motion. Even if I was like, hey, I can take care of this or do something like that, it was like he was still leading and providing in that way. So that's where I feel like when it comes to 50-50, it's challenging because a woman, how can you go 50-50 on carrying a child for 9 months? You can't really. like they're going to take care, they're carrying this child, and things like really change. And so that's where I feel like when it comes to 50-50, are we talking finances? Are we talking everything? Right. So it's like, this is where I do know that conversation has to be had. And it was, I remember the one time I, a guy had said that to me, and it actually shocked me. It was kind of like off-putting because he was, the thing was he was in such fear of putting himself out there, and he was just afraid of rejection, that it was kind of like, hey, I want to make sure that, by paying 50-50, like I wasn't going to take advantage of him or something. And it just, it didn't feel right. Right. But now I understand why. So I think it really just comes down to what your take is on that, because I know some women who are very much driven, and they're like, I want to make my money. I don't care. They don't care about that. They're more, I have women, I'm, I have this couple, and she's like the breadwinner for sure. And but it does have a little bit of this, you can tell, he doesn't feel like he's putting enough in, and it kind of plays on his confidence a bit, right? And so I think, again, it goes, and things happen, right? Because you could be making all this money, and then something happens, and then your wife or your partner has to maybe step in. I get all that. But I think, like, from the beginning, you have to be really honest with yourself if you're okay with that. And I feel like I have my own business. I could do my own thing, but I still feel, I know that I like a stronger man who wants to like lead and provide and just has that type of mentality. Right. Um, so that's kind of my take on that.
I love everything you said, and just about mentality. And I can't remember. I heard this, um, and it was especially, just because I've been reading the Bible. I'm in the Old. I finished the New Testament first, and then the Old. But it was a sermon, and I remember now. It was like an interview, and he was famous. He's a pastor now, but he was talking about the alpha. The alpha. There's really no such thing as an alpha male.
Mm.
The alpha is the marriage, was the male and female.
Yeah.
And I love when I just remember that. I love that he said that because um, really there is no such thing as a 50-50. It's just, hey, I'm
Yeah.
the king, she's the queen, and we just make stuff happen. And again, I love that, the mentality, because, okay, I'm gonna say it because, you know, the Cash App crew will just have to talk. I'm sorry. I told y'all to bring your first aid kit. And I just feel like, especially being in my late 20s, what I've seen just, over the past several, couple of years, especially,
Hmm.
it's from a male perspective, just with women, it's that you really have to, again, once you do that inner work, you really have to
Hmm.
understand what kind of woman you're dating or what kind of woman you're attracting, and really understand the mentality of the women,
Yeah.
because there's a lot of Cash App crew women out there that just, kind of want to chill and just be handed money.
Right.
And I just want to distinguish the difference. There's a difference from, hey, as the man, I'm going to be the knight in shining armor. I'm going to be the protector, the provider. There's a difference between
Yes.
that and, again, like we were talking about earlier, just being the nice guy and, oh, she's just going to be, a sack of potatoes and not do anything and not, help me or attribute to the relationship anyway. But
Yeah.
I'm just gonna essentially pay for everything. And so I really think that's the key difference, especially in the youth, because there's so many, you know, kind of that Cash App crew type women where they're just going to,
Like,
hey,
give me
send me
money.
money, send me money.
Hmm.
I just know even on social media, it's like random people
Yeah.
inbox you and just say, hey, can you Cash App me $30? Hey, can I borrow $200? And you won't even know them, or it's like, hey, we're Facebook friends, so you must want to
Yeah.
let me use money. And I really just think that has kind of thrown off men, just from a man's perspective, But again, you just have to realize the women that you're attracting, you
Mm-hmm.
know, there's always been a Cash App crew, you
Yeah.
know, even back in the day, it was just um,
Yeah,
different
no.
mentalities.
And it's so true because it's just like anything, right? It's just like when these guys, it's like their intentions, and so that's why it goes back to when I think of, and you're talking about like the 50-50. I really feel like it depends on what your mentality, what it is. And like you said, I agree. I don't really think there is like a 50-50 because how can it really be like that, right? Because there's going to be times where you're carrying the weight, where she's carrying the weight, and it could be financially, it could be, with household things. There's so many different things. And not that, um, like you said, when it comes to like the nice person, it's not that it even has to be like a role, but what I feel is important is what is your mentality around that, right? Because it doesn't necessarily have to be a role, but if you're like, oh no, I don't want to work and I want my husband to take care of everything, and that this really has to be talked about. And if he's not that person, or if he's thinking like, no, I want someone who's going to be career, I can't be taking care of everything, right? So it's kind of like, again, what is it that you want? How do you want your role, if you will, to be? What are you looking for in a partner? And then finding somebody who's going to be aligned to it, right? Because like you said, there are going to be Cash App people. And so if you don't want to get caught up in that, that's totally fine, right? But they're going to go do their thing. And if you're like, or if you feel like I would love to be able to at least take care of majority of, say, the bills, if it comes to financial piece, fine. But when I look at someone who's protecting and providing, it's way more than even financial. It's, are you creating that safe environment for for a female, let's say, for example, to just be more in her feminine? And what that means is you're protecting her mentality, you're protecting her emotionally, you're protecting her physically. There's so many different elements to that. And so I think sometimes that's where people might lose sight of that, of what that actually looks like. It's more than that, because you want someone to be able to trust you. And so if that's the case, then yeah, you want to be able to show them that you can protect them and have their back like that too. And then she will do the same for you, but in different ways, right? So,
Yeah, I love the way you broke that down because again, I think a lot of people just in the youth especially,
hmm
we focus I think the 50-50 conversation is just focused solely on finances. Like, oh,
yeah,
who's gonna pay the bill? And like we've said, realistically, you can't just say, nope, I paid for dinner yesterday. We're just not gonna eat.
yeah, yeah,
You're obviously gonna eat, right?
right,
And then to your point, just even financially, there's going to be different seasons where one or the other has to carry the more weight. So if,
yeah,
your wife gets hurt at work or she's out of work and sick and she just doesn't have the funds,
right,
one, obviously the funds are conjointed, once you're married, but even so, you're not going to say, oh, well, I guess the light bill's not going to get paid because she didn't have her half, right?
yes,
Or you're not going to get evicted because, oh, she didn't have her half of the rent or the
right.
mortgage. So we're just going to foreclose on the house because I'm not paying the whole mortgage this month, right? And so you really just have to, again, it goes back to the communication, the alignment, and the vision, like you were speaking of earlier. And so, with that being said, how has your coaching career really helped yourself personally? You know,
Well, I remember years ago when I was going through one of my certifications, and I remember her background was actually in therapy. And so she was saying that, you can take all of the courses and learn all the things like she did. And she said, but really, truly, she said and work on yourself. But she said her true transformation came when she started working with other people. And it's so true. And I didn't understand it until I did, right? And so what that means is you start seeing people's patterns, right? Like you and I are having this conversation, and now you're thinking of like, oh my God, this was me in my youth, or this is whatever, right? And so oftentimes they're mirroring back some of the things that I thought maybe I worked on, or still could be a trigger, or bring things to light for myself that I do it in I experienced that in coaching sessions when I first started coaching with people. And it was very helpful because that was me, being able to see myself through them, and then going to work on some of the things that were coming up for me. So example, if it's like if somebody, let's say, was cheating on someone and that was triggering for me, I have to still be a safe and neutral space for them, right? So if something's triggering me, I know that I need to go back and work on that, right? Because there's something still inside of me that needs to be healed and looked at. So
Awesome, awesome. I love the way you said that because it kind of reminds me of just podcasting in general. For me, it's like, you'll have a guest and they'll say something on their own personal experience or story. It's like, wow, that's kind of me. I never really thought of that. Like similar to earlier, it's like,
Mhm.
I guess I was the nice guy. And,
Yeah.
it reminded me of how much I hate cigarettes. So thanks for that.
Yeah.
And so I love that. Um, and so again, like I said, it's just been a wonderful episode here on this episode 7, season 2. Talked about a lot of great topics again, a lot of great perspective, really just want the audience to really keen in on really focusing on your inner self. It all ends and begins in you, and you are your own worst enemy, or you can be your greatest asset. And so really look at being intentional and being convicted in your decision making. And if you're on here and you're single, still searching for your soulmate, or that relationship that is ideal, just know that you have to have faith that it can be done. And you really have to not be negotiable with your red flags.
Mhm.
That's one thing that has helped me. And what I've learned is, hey, I'd rather just be single and just not date a woman with cigarettes. I'm using that as a funny example, but
It's
it could
yeah.
be, it could be anything. It could be, hey, I want a man that, and like I said, you own your own non-negotiable. So, don't let anybody tell you something's unrealistic or that you
Yep.
can't have a certain standard. If you're a woman out there and you make 6 figures and you say, hey, my man's got to at least make 80K, hey, that's your non-negotiable. You don't have to listen to your family. You don't have
Mhm.
to don't let a slick tongue guy that's living on the street sweet talk you and say, oh, I don't have a job, but I can take care of you. If that's your standard, be convicted and hold
Yeah.
forth in that standard. Don't compromise and don't settle. Because again, it's just always gonna eat. It's gonna eat at yourself inside, and then when that person leaves, they're still themselves, right? You didn't really hurt them any. They just did you just did all the pain to yourself, and then and then that changes your outlook on relationships now because you allowed yourself to not stay whole and stay true to
Yeah.
yourself. And so with that being said, what is your best success story and how can the people find you?
Oh gosh. Well, besides myself, right? Because mine's been the longest person that I've been working with, and definitely has been my best success story. But I do feel, God, I mean, I remember I was working with someone who had a lot of insecurities. And it was funny because oftentimes she was coming to me and she was stressed out, and it was like her relationship, and she was so anxious. She was so anxious all the time because she didn't really feel like this person was going to stay. But there's always a sabotaging. There's sometimes people are sabotaging, which I don't even believe in self-sabotage, but that's a whole other thing. But I feel like she couldn't she wasn't allowing herself to see herself, right? And so that's one of the challenging things, is to try to get through, like a wall, right? It's like, okay, how are we going to do this? But I remembered I gave her some assignments to do. She and came back, and it was so interesting what a shift there was, because for once I think she started to really go inward. She allowed herself to do that. I think she was terrified. And I find that that's one of the biggest things with people is that they're just really afraid to see what they're going to find, or, and so I think the reason why I think it was like such a huge success story was because it required the most courage, right? Because I have people who maybe have some awareness, they're ready to go, or they have done some kind of work. And for this person to really take herself on, um, was huge for me, because once she did that, she started to see what her patterns were. She started to see how she put everybody above herself, and she had zero boundaries. And in reality, what it was that she had the relationship that she was, it was spilling out into her romantic relationship, but it actually was a relationship with somebody from work. It was like with her boss, that when she actually started doing the work, she was just seeing how um she wasn't setting any boundaries. She was working crazy hours and didn't have any time for herself or anything else, so she was very depleted. And so it's like, when you take the time again to look into that mirror and see how you're actually creating this in your life, she started going to work in that, and started to get, she had so many tools, to calm her anxiety, learn how to set boundaries, and really started to cultivate a better relationship with her boss. But then also, what that did was it showed everyone that was at work how to step into their power. And so then she was going to leave this relationship, because in a way she kept saying that she's like sabotaging it, and she was, until finally she got a handle on herself. And then and it was funny because her partner would be like, when's your next session, coach, but she started making so many strides that even in that relationship, they became more connected, because she wasn't seeing him as like the enemy anymore, or maybe in projecting it onto him, because she was owning and taking care of her stuff, right? And so that's where oftentimes people sometimes will be in relationships, and they're always wanting the other person to get help. And sometimes what I find is, sometimes it only takes one person, because when you come in, and you can be in a relationship or not, but when you come in and start doing the work on yourself, then your partner starts to respond differently to you. Everybody starts to respond differently to you, right? Because you're showing up differently. You're more calm. You're more at peace. You're not frantic and chaotic or very anxious all the time. So I think that was like it was definitely one of the best and challenging dynamics that I worked with. So,
Also, I love that story again. For those of you listening, just know that, you know, if you're willing to put in the work, it can come into fruition. Um, I love the work dynamic that you said, because a lot of times, you know, we spend more hours at work than we do at home with our partner, right?
mm-hmm.
And so sometimes we unconsciously, inadvertently take what happens at work out on what happens at home. And we always hear that saying, whatever you came in to work with, leave it at the door, or whatever you came home with, same vice versa, whatever came from work, leave it at the door. And that holds true here, because, what she thought was a terrible relationship romantically at home, it was like,
Mm-hmm.
actually, if you just, they used to say back in the day, grow a pair and just, put your big girl pants on and we always say, put your foot down, you know,
Yeah.
put those stilettos or that high, to put those heels or those flats and, stomp the floor and really, set the tone and really be firm again, it goes back to what I said earlier, being convicted, in your decision making and your boundaries, and really set that tone. And then again, like you said, the world will respond to the tone of how you live your life. And
Yes.
so, with that being said, can you tell the audience, where they could find you?
Yeah, so I am on Facebook. You can find me at Mara Palermo. I'm also on Instagram. It's Mara T, as in my middle initials, Therese. So Mara T Palermo. And I'm also, you can go to my website, which is marapalermo.com. So those are the areas where I hang out mainly. I do have a TikTok, but that's not as, my main focus. So usually Facebook and Instagram would be the main platforms.
Awesome, awesome. And then any last minute advice or words of encouragement that you would give the people of Dominion?
Yes. This is one of the things that I always tell my clients. And it's my one guarantee, because I can't really guarantee results, right? Because it's up to you to do the work. But what I can say is that I can guarantee that the one relationship that you will always be in is the one with yourself. So it is the most important relationship. So make sure that you nurture it, make sure that you give it attention, and make sure it is the best relationship you ever have.
Awesome. And just like back in the day when Bret Hart, you are the best version of yourself,
Yeah.
as long as you're continuing to work on it daily. And so, with that being said, congratulations to all the listeners and viewers. You made it out of the Black Garden, without being severely injured. If you did get pricked, if you're the Cash App crew, I'm sorry. Go ahead and put that Neosporin and that Band-Aid on. You'll be all right. And really, really appreciate, Mara coming on the show today. And again, go ahead and follow her socials. And again, if you have any questions regarding her coaching practice, feel free to reach out. With that being said, it's been a wonderful, time today inside the Black Garden. Again, tune in Valentine's Day 2025 at 5 p.m. Eastern time for this wonderful season 2. And this has been Dominion, your host, and Miss Mara Palermo out of the wonderful, sunny, shiny, coastal Charlotte, Carolina. Hope you guys have a good one, and we'll see you next time inside the Black Garden. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to Decree of Dominion. I hope today's episode empowered you to reclaim your voice and walk boldly in your truth. Remember, healing is a journey, and you don't have to walk it alone. If you found value in this episode, make sure to follow us on Spotify and subscribe to our YouTube channel for more inspiring stories and conversations. Stay connected with our community on Facebook and Instagram, where we share resources, encouragement, and continue the conversation. And don't forget, your story matters. Until next time, keep declaring the dominion of the darkest parts of your mind to reveal your true light that shines. God bless you.